just want to explain you the system, how it runs. Yesterday, I think I have given you the objectives of the system. The first thing is, we are going to discuss certain questions every day. And you are given a schedule. And that schedule, based on that, you are supposed to study those topics and write the answers. These classes are meant for purely value addition. Right, don't think that I have to follow that exact schedule which has been given to you in the Kalam program. That program is meant for writing assignments and the test series. These classes are meant to explain you various new developments related to the topics. That is the difference between these two. Right. So today, we are going to do two topics. One is Indian Parliament and then Election Commission of India. Indian Parliament, Election Commission of India. My reference book is Rethinking Public Institutions in India. There are very much a critical analysis about the public institutions in the country. This book is by Devesh Kapoor, Pratap Banu Mehta. So, I am going to do the syllabus from this particular book today. Write down few questions. Analyze reasons for decrease in parliamentary effectiveness. For decrease in parliamentary effectiveness. Analyze reasons for decrease in parliamentary effectiveness. How frequent disruptions in the parliament, can be addressed. How frequent disruptions in parliament can be addressed. Second thing, question hour is vital for the functioning of representative democracy. Vital for the functioning of representative democracy. Vital for the functioning of representative democracy. Analyze the reasons. Analyze the reasons. Analyze the reasons for its failure to ensure accountability of the executive. For its failure to ensure accountability of the executive. Accountability of the executive. Next is, this year we have Office of Profit in the news. Office of Speaker is in news. And then standing committees, because standing committees are made transparent and their reports can be accessible now under RTI. So, the topics that can be asked are Office of Speaker and then Parliamentary or accountability of the executive to the Parliament, because the budget session got washed out due to disruptions. That's where a broader topic which it belongs to is Parliamentary accountability. And then Office of Profit. Office of Profit. Office of Profit. Anti-defection law. Anti-defection law. Speaker's office. So Speaker's office, they can ask a question in relation to anti-defection law. Speaker's office. Speaker's office. So these are the areas they can dwell into from the current affairs. And also certain new mechanisms, e-Vidhan, e-Sansad, like this IT-based certain small tools have come up. But they cannot frame a larger question on that. But this MP LADs, MLA LADs, local area development schemes, so that is mostly criticized by many of the parliamentarians. So in this context, the conflict of interest in the case of various programs such as MP LADs and MLA LADs, that can be a question. Now the third question. Third question. Anti-defection law can actually increase instability of the government rather than decreasing it. Instability of the government rather than decreasing it. Comment. 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 Next. Next question. Office of profit. Office of profit is an issue that need to be understood. Is an issue that need to be understood from greater questions of separation of powers, accountability, democratic accountability, analyze. Now let's take Election Commission of India is also in the news. Next topic is Election Commission of India. So this is the notes which you need to collect from the office on the Election Commission of India. This is called addendum. Now, why Election Commission is important this year? The independence of the Election Commission is being questioned in relation to Gujarat elections. So that's why what are the constitutional vulnerabilities of the Election Commission of India? Write down the questions on that. Discuss the factors that led to regulatory expansionism of Election Commission of India. Regulatory expansionism of Election Commission of India. Next, Election Commission of India, a constitutional body, is actually served with many constitutional weaknesses. Next question. Election Commission of India is a bright example. Election Commission of India is a bright example for institutional and technological innovations. Explain. Elaborate is the right word. Elaborate. Next is, in spite of many success, much success, Election Commission of India failed to control money power in elections. Analyze the reasons. Next is, discuss the vulnerabilities of Election Commission of India. As an independent constitutional body and also as a regulatory agency. And also as a regulatory agency. Next question. Election bonds cannot decrease the money power and cannot decrease the money power. Solution lies in openness. Solution lies in openness. This is from the interview of S.Y. Qureshi. Openness. Analyze. Analyze. Next is criminalization of politics is a threat to democracy. Criminalization of politics is a threat to democracy. Discuss the reasons for increase in number of criminal elements in politics. In politics. Can legal mechanisms alone solve the problem of criminalization of politics? Can legal mechanisms alone solve the problem of criminalization of politics? Next, electoral reforms suggested from time to time with little progress. Analyze the reasons. Analyze the reasons why we are unable to take forward the electoral reforms in this country. Analyze the reasons. Now, so I have focused on Election Commission as an institution. In this, the major emphasis is related to innovations at the Election Commission, failures of the Election Commission, and a broader question is about independence of the Election Commission. And then in the Parliament, we have majorly focused on accountability of the executive to the Parliament, independence of the office of the Speaker, or neutrality of the office of the Speaker. And last year, the money bills are in very much news. And ordinance is there in the news in 2015. But the question was not asked. So that if they go 2 years back, they may ask the question on ordinance, or they may also ask the question on money bill. Is this wise to pass the ordinary bills as money bills? So these are the things which we can expect as the questions. Now, this year, last year there were 2 questions on elections in India, electoral reforms, and simultaneous elections too. So this year probably they may go to another constitutional body, that may be CAG. Or RBI, after demonetization, independence of RBI is also under scanner as an institution. But no question was asked on RBI as an independent institution. Because our syllabus clearly talks about statutory bodies too, along with constitutional bodies. So the RBI and its independence is not been asked. And the third thing is, the banking sector is also failing in India. So in this context, the failures of RBI as a regulator, in this context, Mr. Urjit Patel has expressed his grievances towards the public sector banks. So that's why RBI and its functioning as a regulatory institution, that never has come as a question. So that also can be a question with regard to the statutory bodies. In the constitutional bodies, CAG is very much in the news, and there were no questions in the CAG, on the CAG. And the CAG can be a question because Mr. Vinod Rai, who was accused of CAG activism, he was appointed as chairman of Banks Board's Bureau, the post-retirement posting. So it means, to what extent CAG is independent? Do we need to convert the CAG into a multi-member body? That can be a question over there. Do we need to convert CAG as a multi-member body? Now, so today we will cover these 2 topics, and tomorrow we will cover Supreme Court, CAG, these 2 topics as public institutions. One more public institution is President's Office. So especially during Pranab Mukherjee, President Office is gained quite a significance as a constitutional authority. Now, Coming to the first area that is related to Parliament. Now, what are the weaknesses of the parliamentary accountability? So, how the parliamentary accountability can be ensured? Based on the number of sittings of the legislative house. And more the number of sittings, more the time it is spending on public discourse, more we can ensure the accountability. So the number of sittings of the parliament are increasing or decreasing, the number of days. So the number of days it is sitting are actually decreasing rather than increasing. And then these number of sittings have drastically fallen, and it is around 40 days now. So in this context, the bigger questions are, who calls the parliament for session? Government calls the parliament for session. And how many days parliament has to sit? Who decides on that? Government decides on that. There is something called Business Advisory Committee, and it makes decisions involving all the parties. And unanimously, the Business Advisory Committee makes the decisions. When it has to make the decisions unanimously, it means we are giving veto power to the executive. If the executive do not agree, we are losing that particular thing. So it means that we need to improvise the system with regard to the number of sittings. So in this case, around 3 weeks before, the details of the sessions are given to MPs. So that's why we can have an annual calendar for the sittings of the parliament. We shall have an annual calendar. These are the practices which are there in Britain. And then, why the government has to call for the sittings? Indian National Congress, it has put a specific request to the Britishers during pre-independence. What it says is, if at least certain percentage of the members, at least 1/3 of the members, if they ask for a sitting of the parliament, the session has to be conducted. So the session on request of handful of MPs. Session on request of MPs. We can implement that too. Now, Orissa has passed a law, Odisha. The law, what it says is this. The parliament, that is their assembly, has to sit for a minimum of 60 days. So there has to be a law on minimum number of sittings. Minimum number of sittings. Odisha is the example. Odisha is the example. And then, so we also have MP, disqualification of MPs if they do not attend for the house. But this disqualification was never taken seriously. So it means attendance of the MPs has to be clearly monitored. Attendance of MPs have to be clearly monitored. So it means the number of sittings have to be improved, attendance in the sittings have to be improved, and the people who are attending the parliament shall be able to talk. So these are the 3 things we need to improve. If the people who are attending the parliament, if they have to talk, then they shall have the freedom of speech. What is regulating this freedom of speech in the parliament? One of the thing is anti-defection law. So it means the bigger question of freedom of speech is related to anti-defection law. Now with regard to anti-defection law, you know the basic provisions. I am not going into the basic provisions of anti-defection law. Now let's take, India suffers from this high command politics. So that reflects the centralization in Indian political party system. Indian political party suffers from this politics of Charishma and politics of Darshan. So now an MP in a representative democracy, ideally he has to represent the wishes of his constituency. Wishes of his constituency. What his people want, he shall be able to represent that. But is that happening in reality? So here, why is that not happening? So political party, this word, is mentioned anywhere in the constitution. It is only mentioned in the anti-defection law. So anti-defection law, it covers or takes the political party as a unit. It takes the political party as a unit. And in its objectives, it clearly states that achieving the stability of the governments, that is what its objective. Ensuring stability in governance. So in this case, what it says, if any defection from a political party has to be disqualified. So, but political party and one single party forming the government, this has ended in India. So single party forming the governments is no more the situation, and we moved from it to coalition politics. Now, today we have a situation. If I am the chief of a small political party, I will be respected more, rather than I am a senior leader of a larger party, national party. So it means every person in a political party wants to break from himself and form his own faction so that he gains greater significance in Indian politics. Right? Previously, the era of national parties was existing. Today, the era of small regional parties is existing. So it means this particular anti-defection law was made when the national parties or larger parties were ruling, or the ruling scenario in India. Now, more than that, the factor of stability is influenced by the coalition. So this coalition is not being covered under the anti-defection law. So it means the very objective is getting defeated now. And the next is, an MP has to be made accountable by his constituency. So it means the people through elections have to make the MP accountable. That is what we call it as democratic accountability. This democratic accountability is weakening because of two reasons. One is, MP can easily justify his action stating that my political party has given the whip like this, so I have to vote the same way. So anti-defection law provides for a reason for an MP not to respect the wishes of his constituency. And the second thing is, so in India, we have something called voice vote. Voice vote means you just raise your hands or shout, then the subjective opinion of the speaker, it allows for passing the bill. So we have the recorded voting system, but to the convenience of the government and speaker holding favoritism to the government, they never take up this particular registered vote. More than 94% of the voting in the parliament, it happens through voice vote. So which MP is voting in favor of the bill, which MP is voting against the bill, no one knows. So there are two things, anti-defection law and the next is voice vote. Both of them are decreasing the accountability of the parliament member to his constituency. And third thing, if we have to improve the effectiveness of our MPs, they need resources at their disposal. Do you know how much money is being paid per month to an MP to maintain his resources? 30,000 rupees. So in the United States of America, 35 to 40 staff members are being given to every Senate member. And a handful of researchers were given to them. Even it is the case with United Kingdom. Because at least they have to, if you talk about Standing Committee on Agriculture, the member of parliaments on the Standing Committee has to see or go through some 8 to 10 bills every year, at least some 4,000 to 5,000 pages of literature if we take the last year into consideration. For them to maintain effective debate in the parliament, they need the necessary research support. Do we have that research support to our MPs? No. If you take in Delhi, MPs were given a space for house, but they are not given the office space. So the third thing is, our MPs do not have sufficient resources at their disposal to ensure better debate. So these three are making our MPs ineffective. One is anti-defection law, is curtailing their voice. The lack of the recorded voting, we are unable to know their preferences, so that constituency was unable to make them accountable. And the third thing is lack of resources is at the disposal of the MPs that makes their debate ineffective. So we need to improve on these three things. And then, with regard to the parliament accountability that has to be ensured by the parliament, the first question which we have to talk about is the sittings. So the number of sittings are actually decreasing, and the minimal sittings which the parliament is making are dominated by the government voice rather than the opposition voice. And the third thing is the absenteeism of the MPs is plaguing this. And Prime Minister Modi has pointed out this, saying that MPs have to regularly attend the parliament and fulfill their democratic responsibilities. And in these circumstances, another issue is to what extent the executive's respect towards the legislature makes the legislature effective. So in the context of the Prime Minister Modi not addressing the parliament regularly, that was the concern expressed by many people. Now, so the next point is executive and his responsibility towards the parliament. Now, when Prime Minister Nehru was in office, he never made a foreign tour when the parliamentary proceedings are going on. He ensured that opposition voice is more heard in the parliament. Now, Somnath Chatterjee, he was speaking in the Parliament House. There is an article which has come up. What he said is, the biggest testimony to the Nehru is his bitter critics like him the most for his democratic credentials. So it means to what extent executive gives respect to the legislature, to that extent legislative acts as a check against the misuse of the power by the executive. Now, and the next aspect, question hour. Now you know every day the session starts with question hour, and most of the times this question hour is disrupted. Now, if question hour, 0 hour, business hour. Now if the business hour is disrupted, they will extend the business hours, but the question hour is never extended. So it means that the question hour need to be made sacrosanct. Question hour need to be made sacrosanct. So, prime ministerial questions is the concept which is taken up in UK. On the broader policy questions, the Prime Minister has to answer. So today question hour in India is just confined to the ministers alone. So do you know how many questions are asked among the listed questions? It is less than 15%. Understand the status of the question hour in India. Most of the question hour's time is lost due to disruptions. Question hour timing or time is not extended. Now, what is the purpose of the question hour? It is to know about the working of the government, right? It is to know about the working of the government. Today we have many tools to know about the working of the government. We have RTI. If you file the RTI, you can get the information within 30 days. So, most of the questions which the members were asking, these are actually can be got through RTI itself. So it means you can use the question hour for the issues which you cannot generate through RTI. So most of the members, more than 90% of the questions, the answers to them can be obtained through just filing an RTI in the government. So the members also shall be responsible to take the information through RTI wherever it is possible, rather than taking the question hour as a tool. So if you reserve the question hour for more important questions, where the government is avoiding the answers, obviously we can better the question hour and its functioning. So the two important points are prime ministerial question hour has to be introduced in India. The second is, wherever is possible, the government has to go through RTI route. And then declining question hour, there is one classical example, cash for questions scam in India. So obviously as the parliament's respect is declining, the other institutions try to occupy its space. So which is the institution which is taking the space of the parliament? That is judiciary. So as the legitimacy of the parliament is decreasing and its space is getting encroached by the judiciary, and that is leading to greater conflict between the judiciary and legislature. Now, Disruptions is the next issue. Who will get benefited because of disruptions? Obviously, the parliamentary sitting best helps the opposition to expose the government. But if the most of the time is taken up by the government itself, and parliament in opposition is disrupting the house, then will it do any good for democracy? No. Now, what is the reason for the opposition to take up the disruptions rather than effectively using the parliament? Why they are disrupting? So Arun Jaitley has used, when he was in the opposition, that disruption is a legitimate act to express the grievance of the opposition when the speaker is not cooperating. So in this case, to solve the issue of disruption, there are two techniques. One, these practices are again there in the UK itself. So sometime in the house, let's take 20% of the time, it has to be given for opposition to determine the agenda. So agenda has to be decided by opposition for 20% of its time. So when opposition is setting the agenda, it shall not have a grievance. It can list all the issues which it wants to raise. The major question is, in the last session, opposition wants to talk about, with regard to Andhra Pradesh issue, Kaveri river water issue by Tamil Nadu, so sugarcane issue by the Uttar Pradesh MPs. So like that, different people had different grievances. Now why can't we give some dedicated time to the opposition to decide the agenda? So in UK, 20% of the time was given to it. And then the next accusation is against the speaker. That is partisan behavior of the speaker. Partisan behavior of the speaker. Why the speaker has to show the partisan behavior? Because he gets elected from a particular political party, and if he has to re-elect in the next election, obviously he has to be loyal to his political party. And across the states, the speaker's office is politicized a lot. And today also there is an article about governor and the speakers by Kapil Sibal, which talks about the politicization of the constitutional office of speaker and the governor. So how can we avoid the politicization of the office of speaker? How can we avoid this? Politicization of the office of speaker. Now here, the next term of the speaker shall be issued. If the speaker wants to contest the election in the next term, there will be no candidate fielded against him or her. So that assurance has to exist for the office of the speaker. And speaker has to constitutionally resign from the political party which he gets elected from. Right? He has to constitutionally resign from the political party from which he got elected. So we have to make that provision. And second, he has to be assured of getting re-elected to the House, and opposition shall not field a candidate against him in the next term. That's what is been done as a convention in UK. And the third thing, a speaker once retired, and if he is not willing to contest the election, his political life shall be assured by nominating him to the upper house. So these are the three things we can take for making the speaker's office independent of his political party. Now similarly, as we discussed the anti-defection law, what are the solutions for anti-defection law? Now most of the Western democracies, Europe or America, they do not have anti-defection law. We can also remove the anti-defection law. Or the second thing, we can limit the anti-defection law. So Varun Gandhi wrote one article in Hindu where he was stressing on limiting the anti-defection law. So anti-defection law has to be limited only to certain motions such as no confidence motion. With regard to others, like discussing various bills, the members of parliament has to be given free speech. So one is removing, repealing, or limiting the anti-defection law. Because if we observe in practicality, anti-defection law did not yield the results which is expected out of it with respect to the stability of the government. Why it failed to yield the results which it has to yield? So one, let's take, if I vote against the party, I will be disqualified. But can I undo the action which I did before? Let's take, now I have to make a, or else there is a no confidence motion is put on vote. I receive some 10 crores of rupees and I vote against my own party. So because of this, the government has fallen. So the government which has fallen, can we do or can we bring back that government? I will be disqualified, but the consequence of my action is never, we cannot undo the consequences which have been occurred because of my vote. I'm happy because I got my money. Even they disqualify, I'm okay. Probably the other party may support me to win the elections again. So at the critical moments when the stability is required, most of the times these MPs have behaved other way around. So it means the very objective of stability did not help us. And the second thing is, you have this loophole that is 2/3 of them. Previously it was 1/3, now it is 2/3. If they defect, it cannot be called as a defection. So it means the greater problem still exists with anti-defection law. And in functionality, anti-defection law did not bring in this. In this context, Mr. This Venkaiah Naidu, in upper house, he has stated one thing. 3 months have to be the time to decide on disqualification. Because for the speaker, there is no time limit to disqualify a member. So if you take Andhra Pradesh and Telangana assemblies, what happened? Many of the people, for example, from TTP defected to TRS in Telangana and became ministers. Their YSRCP defected to the TDP and they became ministers. So in that scenario, the speaker has to make the decisions, but speaker is never making the decisions on time. So that's why Venkaiah Naidu, what he said is, it has to be within 3 months the decision has to be made. Now here there is another bigger question. Now, the defection, did it really happen in the case of Sharad Yadav and other members in Rajya Sabha? So Mr. Sharad Yadav, yes, belonging to Janata Dal United, has attended the meeting of RJD, and that itself has taken as a reason for his disqualification. Can it be a ground for reason? He did not resign from his party, just he spoke about the leadership of the party. So in these circumstances, again, is that not symbolic of centralization in Indian politics? Right. That's a typical example, that's an example which you can pose for the centralization, how the anti-defection is helping for. So, these are the solutions. There are 3 things which we spoke about which are there in the news. One is limiting the anti-defection law and promoting the freedom of speech, and then making the anti-defection law effective through timely decision. And the third thing is, grounds have to be clearly stated what constitutes the anti-defection for the presiding officers to make the decision. It is always best if we remove this power from the presiding officer and we keep in President of India's hand on the recommendations of Election Commission of India. So these are the traditional points. So other issues, how can we improve the effectiveness of the parliament? What are the other points you can add value from the news? Now, with regard to disruptions, there is another point in this book. Now, the speaker is duty bound today to follow the Business Advisory Committee recommendations in setting agenda. Now, the speaker, beyond the Business Advisory Committee recommendations, he can decide how to run the house. He or she shall be given that particular power. Now, next is legislation. How can we improve the business of the legislature? Do you know, in 2014, within 17 minutes, 8 bills are being passed. So it means, is effective discussion held on those bills? So then how can we improve the quality of discussion on the bills? So how can we say that this bill is qualitative, has come out through rigorous discussion and debate? How can we say that? Now, why I am taking this point is, one of the bill is related to, it's not in this session, it was related to amendment to Juvenile Justice Act. And then the parents of Ms. Nirbhaya, they were kept in Rajya Sabha and allowed to pass the bill. So, it means this kind of emotional responses are expected from the Parliament. And many of the bills are just passed through voice vote without any discussion, just within few minutes it has been passed. The worst is the finance bill, that is the budget. This time there was no discussion about budget, and the Finance Act has come into implementation. And the third point over here is, many of the procedural amendments, powers to the executive, are taken today through the Finance Act. So, Finance Act has become a background route to introduce many of the amendments to IT Act, etc. So, these are all the issues which are there in legislation. So, with regard to the questions of legislation, quality questions, I can say how many of the laws that are getting amended in the next immediate year. If a law is well thought out, does it need to be amended so quickly? No. When the law is introduced hastily, obviously it takes many of the amendments. So most of the Indian laws are amended twice or thrice within 1 year after they are being passed. It means that when a law is being made in a consultative manner with involvement of all the stakeholders, it does not need many amendments within 1 year. So that is a simple example that we are not effectively passing our laws. So in this context, we have department related standing committees, departmental standing committees. Now in India, a bill has to be referred to the departmental standing committees or not is purely the discretion of the executive. So we have to make sure that every bill goes to the standing committee. Every bill has to go to the standing committee. At the second reading, every bill has to go to the standing committee. Now what is the answer of the executive for this? Why are you not giving it for standing committee? Delay is the answer. So we can keep a fixed time for the standing committee to give its recommendations. There has to be fixed time. And third, standing committees' recommendations are good basis for a public discussion. But most of the time standing committee recommendations are not revealed. So recently, Central Information Commission has clearly stated that the standing committee recommendations are public documents. So every standing committee recommendation has to be made open and free for all the citizens for a public discourse. And the Supreme Court also has upheld that. So this way we can improve the functioning of the standing committees as accountability structures. And then, coming to financial accountability. Financial accountability. So you know, there is no discussion on the budget. And the second thing is, most of the demands for grants are guillotined. And third, always there is an assurance for the executive that they can get this budget what they want. What is helping for the executive to get the bills what they want be passed in the House? What is helping the executive? Now I'll put it this way. One of the things which is helping them is anti-defection law. It is an argument, there is an argument against the anti-defection law from separation of powers. What is the argument on separation of powers for anti-defection law? Now let me say, legislature has to make executive accountable. Now when the legislative members and their voting behavior is ensured for the political party, then obviously the government which is in power, which has the majority in Lok Sabha, can easily get the approval of the members of his political party. So then the legislature's approval is taken for granted. So in the separation of powers, legislature and performing its duty is getting weakened. So, whip and anti-defection law, these two are also against to the philosophy of the separation of powers, where executive is getting the guarantee that whatever it wishes gets passed in the Lok Sabha. Because in Lok Sabha, unless the government has the majority, it cannot continue. So that's why another point which has been stated is, this anti-defection law is also against to the philosophy of separation of powers. So the financial accountability, how shall we improve that? Now, Finance Act shall not be the route for introducing various types of ordinary bills. So Finance Act is the money bill. So the government is trying to amend various laws through the Finance Act. So that's why that has to be resisted. So that's a backdoor amendment to the ordinary laws through the Finance Act. Next is, with regard to budget, there has to be a clear discussion on important demands for grants at least, such as defense. Where the large allocations are there, we shall have a clear discussion on that. So obviously, to ensure the clear discussion on these matters, if necessary, greater powers can be given to the Speaker. Disruption or unruly behavior with regard to the budget has to be avoided. For all these things to happen, what is necessary? Political consensus is necessary, which is missing in India. These are the various accountability issues. So if you write these 7 or 8 points, that is more than sufficient in your answer. And then you have your regular points. Now, what are the other traditional debates which we made in the class during our regular course? So Rajya Sabha and its importance in the legislature. And Rajya Sabha is a second house, but Legislative Council is a secondary house, the debate we made. And third, money bill. Why Lok Sabha was given preeminence with regard to money bills? And then, why money bill route shall be avoided for the ordinary bills? That's what is the debate which we already made. So these are the traditional debates. And then, how the parliament, how the accountability of the legislature works in parliamentary system and presidential system. And the committee system, that is Public Accounts Committee, Estimates Committee, Committee on Public Sector Undertakings, how this committee system has evolved and how they have functioned in India till date. Committee system, how did they function till date? And then another debate which is related to the MPs and how to ensure that these MPs perform to the expectations of the citizens, how they are, with regard to criminalization of politics, how shall we avoid these MPs entering into these houses? Those we are going to discuss in the Election Commission again. So in this context, Office of Profit is also discussed to you. Let us understand this Office of Profit. Why this concept of Office of Profit has evolved? What is the reason? Again, go to the general doctrine level. So Office of Profit has evolved from concept of separation of powers. How? In UK, King used to appoint the members of Parliament for various executive positions. So when they are working under the King, they were not acting as an effective control against the King within the House. So that's why any position which they are occupying under the King was considered as Office of Profit. That was the basic origin of this concept of Office of Profit. Obviously, today, in a parliamentary democracy, executive originates from the legislature. So we have to exclude the members of the executive, political executive, from the scope of the Office of Profit. So Council of Ministers are exempted from the scope of Office of Profit. And other than MPs, other than this Council of Ministers, they attract the provisions of Office of Profit. So in this context, many of the people in various states, many of the MLAs in various states, these are been appointed as parliamentary secretaries. So in those circumstances, Delhi also did that. And finally, they are facing the acts of disqualification, because there is a provision in the Constitution that if Office of Profit is not removed from the negative list. Or else, I'll put as this way, a legislature can define what offices that cannot be constructed as the office of profit. And if it is not there in that list, they have to face the disqualification. So the parliamentary secretary positions, these are not in the list, because though the Delhi Legislative Assembly passed the law, it is not yet approved. Lieutenant Governor reserved it for the President. President did not approve that. That's why that has become problematic over there. And the matter went to Election Commission. Election Commission disqualified, and then it went to High Court. High Court said the disqualification is invalid. The reason which is stated is the procedure is not followed. Procedure established by law. So that's why this particular office of profit is in the news. Yes or no? So that's why we can expect a question on this area. So here, obviously, the office of profit goes against the philosophy of separation of powers. Now, if you take the parliamentary secretary positions, the argument is they are more training positions for the legislative members to the positions of executive. The young MPs will be appointed as, MLAs will be appointed as parliamentary secretaries to train them. The counter argument is, these are nothing but political employment to the dissenters. They get all the political privileges. So here, in Shibu Soren case, the Supreme Court has given certain guidelines on office of profit. So you don't need to remember that with a lot of mental strain, remember. So when we can say an office of profit exists, profit means I need to get something from it, right? So am I getting any salary from that? This is the first question. So salary is one thing, other thing is honorarium. So they give me a car to visit a place. So when they give me a car, that is more of an honorarium. Or they give me some 500 for daily expenses, that's honorarium. So for doing a job, if honorarium is given, it is not a salary. So if you are getting money, salary from that office, then it is called as this thing. Now, in the case of Jaya Bachchan, though she was holding the office, she never took the salary. So then the Supreme Court has clarified that either you took it or not, does the office have that privilege or not, is the major question. That was the major question. Now, second thing, we are worried that originally the legislative member ultimately becomes the peon of the executive. So to what extent executive controls the job? It means, to what extent they work under the control of the executive. That is, does the executive has the power to appoint and remove them from the office? Does he have the discretion? Now if he has the discretion and ultimately he reports to the executive, then it can be called as office of profit. The second question is, to whom he reports to, who appoints him and who removes him from the office, and who determines his salary and other privileges. So these are the various questions the Supreme Court has put for test. Now Supreme Court has clearly stated that any one of this is sufficient to call an office as an office of profit. All of them need not stay together. Right. Now the AAP argument is this, they are not getting any salary. But ultimately these are positions which are being determined by the executive, and they enjoy certain privileges of the office, and they have access to all the confidential documents of the executive. So from this argument it has went. Now in this, I have prepared the notes on this topic, and you can refer beyond this. There are certain doctrines into it, and Supreme Court judgments. It is there in the Parliament addendum. So there you can refer to this particular topic. So now let's go back to the questions, because with the little information we can handle the 6 or 7 questions which I gave you there. Now UPSC is giving the questions like this. It starts with general sentence, and then it goes to a specific topic. Now it may start parliamentary accountability, and then it will go into some anti-defection law, or it may go into question hour or any other topic, specific topic. So you need general to specific, that's how the question is moving, and you shall learn the way to answer these particular questions. Now see the questions. What is the first question? Why the parliamentary accountability is decreasing, and the second part of the question. How can we avoid the frequent disruptions in the parliament? It means you need to give some out-of-box solutions for frequent disruptions. Right. So this year, the frequent disruptions can be an expected question. So what is the general question first? So you need to list the points why the parliamentary accountability is decreasing. Sittings, defection law, executive and his and his role, and then question hour, disruptions, and quality of legislation, financial accountability. If you just keep some side headings and do this, and then you have to elaborate on disruptions. In one of the topic which they are expecting is disruptions. So you can write 2 or 3 points related to disruption in that. Question hour is vital for the functioning of representative democracy. It means he's asking a very specific topic. Why the question hour is essential for functioning of democracy? Attlee has said it is the finest example of working of democracy. So, as already you know from the traditional classes, question hour the members can ask the question on each and every topic. So that's why it can be compared to a searchlight that can go to every crevices of the functioning of the executive. And it makes the executive to stand on their foot and to keep every record available to the legislature. That is the fear of the question hour. And then the question hour in India has exposed many of the irregularities of the executive, from the Jeep scam, LIC scam, and even to the 2G spectrum scam. Everything have come through to the light through question hour. So that's why question hour and its importance in accountability, that's we can talk about. Why the effectiveness of question hour is decreasing? Only 15%, I gave you 4 points just now. 15% of questions are being, listed questions are being actually answered. And most of the question hour is wasted every day because of disruptions. And the third thing, question hour once disrupted is not extended. Fourth thing, policy questions were never asked, bigger policy questions. And most of the time in the question hour is wasted in regular questions, and ministers' answers are in the standard format. So these are not innovative, the answers are. So in this context, what we need to do, if necessary, question hour time has to be extended. And then the question hour time has to be extended so that all the listed questions are answered by the minister. And second, prime ministerial question hour has to be bring in to answer bigger policy questions. So it also brings in the presence of the prime minister in the house when the question hour includes the prime ministerial questions, and that makes the accountability of the executive from the highest possible level. The third question, the anti-defection laws can actually increase the instability rather than the stability of government. How they are, if you have to talk on the functionality of anti-defection law. Today anti-defection law is not applicable to coalitions, political party is the unit. What is the second point you need to talk about? Now, anti-defection law is actually leading to splintering of the political parties because the small political party has a greater identity for a senior leader in a larger political party. And the third thing, anti-defection law and instability, if we observe in its working, it did not act as a deterrent for a member to vote against in the critical circumstances. So ultimately it is leading to the fall of the governments. These are the 3 major points that shows that anti-defection law has actually led to instability rather than stability. Office of profit is an issue to be understood from the dimensions of separation of powers, democratic accountability. So office of profit, separation of powers, executive has to be accountable to the legislature, how it gets weakened. And from the dimension of democratic accountability, how can we see the office of profit? Right, whenever a legislative member is working under the executive, so there are few challenges. One is, he is accessing or he is a privileged member in the executive and he is getting that privileged position. And second thing is, today every MP looks for an opportunity to become a minister. So they see this office as an opportunity to this. And third thing, various positions in committees, etc. are increasing, which are being kept out of the scope of the office of profit. The number of subjects out of the scope of office of profit are increasing. To that extent, the democratic accountability is decreasing. Obviously, 91st Amendment Act, the political unemployment is being solved. So the 15% rule, that is being circumscribed by giving these parliamentary secretaries, etc., as the positions. This is how the democratic, the constitutional provisions are being circumscribed or overridden. So these are the points which we need to write to this answer. So these are the 4 questions on this thing. And then one more topic, because of the lack of opposition in the parliament, one more issue that can be a question is role of opposition in democracy. So write down the list of the topics which you need to work on. One is speaker and importance as a constitutional office. Speaker as a constitutional office. Role of opposition and recognition of the status of opposition. Role of opposition and recognition of its status as an opposition. Office of profit. Office of profit. Parliamentary committees and their effectiveness to ensure accountability. Parliamentary committees and their effectiveness as in improving accountability. And then budget and efficacy of recent steps which are taken in improving the budget. What are the recent steps? A preponement of the introduction of the budget, and then doing away with the difference between planned and unplanned. And third thing is, so railway budget getting included in the general budget. So how did these help the functioning of the budget in India? Because already 2 years are over, right? 2 budgets are being introduced, and they can ask an assessment of these reforms which are being undertaken by the NDA government. So on the budget, how these reforms have reflected, those points can be asked for. So for this, I have given you the handout. Does India need to change its financial year? That's that is a traditional question, because Madhya Pradesh recently stated that it is shifting its financial year. So that can be a question for you. Write down that. Financial year of India need to be changed. So these are the other areas which you need to work. And 2 years back, ordinance is very much in the news. From 2014 and 15, ordinance was very much in the news. And I think already a question was asked on ordinance. Repromulgation of ordinances. And then money bill route is the right way for the ordinary bills. From the Rajya Sabha and its role in Indian democracy or Indian parliamentary system and money bill route, both of them can be clubbed together to bring in a question to you. So these are the areas which you need to highlight, right, which you need to search for the questions to answer. The next, I am going for another institution that is called Election Commission of India. Election Commission of India. Are you finding it useful, this way of learning things? Because in classes what we do, we explain the topics. But here we are going from a brief discussion, and most of the emphasis is given on interlinking the topics and making you understand various questions. How the questions can be asked and what are the issues that are in the news from a very broad perspective. Now, with regard to Election Commission of India, so I want you to understand the objectives of the Election Commission of India what are the cardinal principles of Election Commission of India. One is equality, independence, and quality representation. The 3 guiding principles of Election Commission's functioning are to ensure equality and to ensure representation, quality representation, and to ensure its functioning as an independent office. Independence. To ensure its functioning as an independent office. Now, there was a survey which was conducted by Center for the Study of Development Societies. So according to this survey, the most respected institution in India after Army is the Election Commission of India. Election Commission of India enjoys greatest legitimacy after armed forces in India in the eyes of public. So Election Commission of India is, its functions are intertwined with Representation of People's Act. The first is, What are the factors that led to regulatory expansionism of Election Commission? Now, I'll give you the example of Tamil Nadu, AIADMK. What has led to the expansionism of the Election Commission of India? And this regulatory expansionism has happened, and as it did good to the Indian democracy. Now, split in political parties. As the splits in political parties are increasing, who has become an empire to decide to whom the symbols belong to? The Election Commission of India will decide. So which is the original faction? So in the Tamil Nadu politics recently we saw that particular thing. So it was not the original power which was given to the Election Commission of India. So originally that is not there in the mandate. Even in the Representation of People's Act it was not there in the mandate. Slowly Election Commission of India has clearly stated that every party has to submit its internal constitution, so that whenever the splits comes up, based on the internal constitution, it can decide. And the second aspect, model code of conduct, does it have any statutory recognition? Now, actually it was started as voluntary conduct. But slowly, with the approval of all the political parties, today model code of conduct has the effect of a law. The model code of conduct is monitored and supervised by the Election Commission of India. And the next is, the political system has changed due to mobilization of the backward classes. So, you know, the number of backward castes, these have got today voting rights. That has changed the political landscape of India. So, Election Commission of India has actively worked to provide them with the necessary voting rights and the environment to exercise their franchise. And then, support of the Supreme Court. Most of the electoral reforms which are being brought in by the Election Commission of India, these have got the immediate support of the Supreme Court. Supreme Court always stood in support of the Election Commission of India. So, for example, every candidate has to declare his criminal antecedents, educational qualifications, assets. Everything is approved by the Supreme Court. Recently, it went ahead. What are the new reforms which the Supreme Court has suggested? So, that is about criminalization, separate courts. With regard to assets, not just the assets of the individual, but also the assets of his family members. And also monitoring of the increase in assets. So who has to do all these functions? It is ultimately the Election Commission of India. So it means, to an extent, judicial activism has actually helped. Election Commission of India to take forward the electoral reforms in India. So, this can be a specific question. So, Supreme Court and judicial activism is an important reason for the electoral reforms in India. So, because of this, a recent judgment which has happened, under which asset declaration, how much the assets have increased, that judgment you need to see in detail. So, the regulatory expansionism is also due to this thing. And then, another important aspect in the Election Commission's functioning is introduction of EVMs. So because of the EVMs, these technological innovations, the political party's muscle power it was able to decrease. And because of the technology, it was able to effectively monitor the elections. Recently, if you observe, it has brought in the citizens directly reporting it, the responses or any deviations to the Election Commission. They brought in a new app. So, the technological innovations have provided greater regulatory control for the Election Commission of India. And the biggest power of the Election Commission of India is to take control over the civil servants. Now, it is mandatory that whenever the elections dates are announced, the people who are stationed for more than 2 years in a particular office, they will be transferred. So, the transfer of civil servants is an important power for the Election Commission of India. Transfer of civil servants. So many a times political parties used to influence Election Commission of India with regard to timing of elections. That's what is the issue related to Gujarat elections too. But when Lingdo was the election commissioner, chief election commissioner, Seshan was the chief election commissioner, so then there was an assertiveness in the election commission that they need not follow the directions of the executive. Many times what is the reason executive is stating? There is no proper environment to conduct the elections. So Election Commission of India has sent field agents to check out the circumstances and verified it by itself rather than taking the cognizance or notice of the executive. So the timing of elections is more and more determined by the Election Commission of India independently by asserting itself the reasons which are given by the executive. So many a times it stopped listening to the executive about the circumstances on ground. So, and then registration of political parties. So who has to register the political parties? Election Commission of India. Obviously political parties ask for a symbol of their own. Now in Kashmir there is an issue. This separatists, they don't want to register as they want to register as a political party, but they don't want to show the allegiance to the constitution. So in this context, it has clearly stated that no, unless you show the allegiance to the constitution, you will not be registered as a political party. So either to register or not to register, ultimately it will be determined by the Election Commission of India. So two important points which you have to cover in this discussion is Election Commission of India and Model Code of Conduct, Election Commission of India and support of the Supreme Court. So these are the two areas a specific question can be asked. And then another thing is organizational culture of the Election Commission of India. Election Commission of India has strong esprit de corps, the team spirit. Do you know Election Commission of India is a very small organization, but it is able to conduct the elections flawlessly throughout the length and breadth of the country. So because of this esprit de corps is well maintained in the Election Commission of India. So the organization culture of Election Commission is also responsible for its legitimacy and respect. Now, what are the innovations which are being brought in by the Election Commission of India? Because of this new app which they brought in and the discussion on EVMs, so they may ask for innovations brought in by the Election Commission of India. From a larger perspective, if you see, in a very narrow perspective, they may ask a question about EVMs, are they good or bad. But in the larger perspective, what are the innovations of the Election Commission of India? So what are I am dividing these innovations into two categories: organizational innovations and then technological innovations. Organizational and technological innovations. So what are the technological innovations which they brought in? You all know about EVMs and then that recent app which they brought in for reporting. Above all, they brought in something called vulnerability mapping. Vulnerability mapping. So what is this vulnerability mapping? What are the violence prone areas? Vulnerability mapping. And then this communication for election monitoring, direct connectivity. The app name I forgot, please try, I wrote it as communication for election monitoring. A direct contact between the citizens and the Election Commission of India. And voter identity cards and their computerization. Voter identity cards. Now, because of these voter identity cards, we are able to reduce these false votes, wrong votes. Impersonation was the biggest problem in India. We were able to reduce this impersonation. And what are the organizational innovations? Now, with regard to expenditure monitoring, what they did is, so they have closely appointed monitoring groups among the citizens itself. So these are called booth level officers. The innovation is booth level officers. These booth level officers are not government officers. One among the citizens will be appointed as a booth level officer. And this booth level officer will help the Election Commission of India to update the electoral rolls and also to report on the conduct of the elections directly to the Election Commission of India. Who is a booth level officer? That will not be, or else that will be confidential, and these booth level officers were very effective in improvising the electoral rolls in India. And then SVEEP. So many cine stars are coming and asking you to vote. So that, and voting percentage has remarkably increased in India these days. Why the voting percentage is increased? What is the role played by the Election Commission of India? That is SVEEP, Systematic Voter Education and Electoral Participation Program. Systematic Voter Education and Electoral Participation Program. And it also has established an institute that is called India International Institute for Democracy and Election Management. India International Institute for Democracy and Election Management. So these are the innovations which are been brought in by the Election Commission of India. Right? That is the normal practice across the world, postal ballots. Okay, you can also write down. Now actually, now these are voting rights to NRIs, etc. These are the parliamentary decisions rather than Election Commission of India's decisions. Now the biggest debate which is going on today is prisoners and their voting rights. Now let's take many of the people who are there in the jails. These are not actually convicted. Because of the improper functioning of our system, many of them are in the jails as the under trials. So why shall, though they are not convicted, why shall we deprive them their right to vote? That is one bigger question which is under debate. The rights of the prisoners to vote. Why shall we deprive them the democratic right? Now, the next is, why the Election Commission of India has failed to reduce the role of the money power in elections. What are the reasons? Okay, you know that now it is 2,000 rupees. Under 2,000 rupees, cash receipts can be accepted. So the first point is the role of the cash. Why the Election Commission of India is unable to reduce money power in the elections? And what are the solutions to reduce the money power in the elections? What are the solutions for the money power in elections? I already have discussed it to you in the regular classes. Now, how the role of the money power has to be reduced? Right, one is cash transfers kadamma, cash donations. So cash donations, they shall not have any role. But still we allow for the cash donations. The second is anonymity. Anonymity has to be replaced by? We have to replace the anonymity with transparency. Now here there is a bigger question. Now the donors want to be anonymous because they don't want to face the witch hunt of the opposition when it comes to power. That's why they don't want their names to be this thing. Today, corporate donations are allowed or not? Corporate donations, Rajiv Gandhi government has allowed them. Now corporate donations, do they get the IT exemption or not? Any donation to a political party gets the IT exemption. So now, in spite of this IT exemption, they want to donate anonymously rather than openly. Why? Because once they donate open, or else once they take the tax benefit in their account books, they have to reflect that or not. When they submit the account books, they have to say that I have donated this much. That's why they allow to be anonymous rather than reflecting them in their account books. That's what is increasing the role of the black money. So this is where electoral bonds have come up. So electoral bonds are promising the anonymity to the donors, and at the same time political parties are getting the funds. So obviously who gets benefited? Who has got the highest donations this year? Now the party in power. So that's why opposition is getting weakened because of this anonymity. So tomorrow opposition power comes into power, probably they may also start extracting the money. So now most of the corporate groups, they want anonymity. So this anonymity has been provided through election bonds. Along with the anonymity, they also want IT exemption. So election bond is actually satisfying that particular role. But if we want to clean the elections, is that has to be anonymity or transparency? We have to bring in total transparency in the electoral donations. Here we need to understand a bit of the past, what happened. Indira Gandhi, to kill the opposition, especially when BJP was raising during her times, it was called Brahmin Baniya Party. So it had a lot of support of the traders. So it was getting donations and it is becoming active. So that's why donations from corporate entities was declared as illegal. So now, in the West also, corporate donations, few countries like Germany, France, they also prohibited the donations of corporate agencies for the reason that it will compromise the sanctity of elections. Now, Indira Gandhi followed the same line. But all those countries have introduced simultaneously the state funding of elections. India, though banned the corporate donations, no state funding of elections has come up. Obviously, every political party was deprived of money. As Congress was in power, it was one or the other way getting the money, but opposition, they are not getting the money. So that's why they have started taking the money through back door. That has laid the foundation for corruption, political corruption in India. And Rajiv Gandhi later, he has brought in a change. He tried to bring in change, and he allowed for corporate funding. He also provided IT exemptions, but it did not give the necessary incentive for this business and politics nexus, because the corruption already got deep-rooted and it was unable to eliminate that. So the illogical step to prohibit the corporate donations, or prohibiting corporate donations, did not go with the state funding of elections as happened in the West. So this has increased the levels of corruption. And the next is, there is something called the concept of third-party funding. Third-party funding. What is third-party funding? If he is my friend and he is spending on behalf of me, that do not come under effective monitoring. And today, if my party gives me certain material, or party gives certain funds for me for expenditure, that party's expenditure on the candidate do not come into election expenditure monitoring. So it means existence of cash, politics and business nexus which has been deep-rooted through decades of work, and the third thing, leaving certain expenditure from monitoring. All these makes the election expenditure monitoring ineffective. Now, if a candidate is caught with election expenditure, what he will simply say, this is the money which has been spent from the funding of the political party. So when you give exemptions and monitoring becomes very much weak. So that's what is the major problem in India. Next is, now, does Election Commission of India, can they disqualify a candidate if they found that they have excessively spent in the election? Now, there is an MP called J.C. Divakar Reddy. He openly said, 40-50 కోట్లు ఖర్చు పెడతాం. Now, when he agreed before the TV, why can't we disqualify them? Now, the Representation of People's Act do not provide Commission an unambiguous authority to disqualify or to impose sanctions on the candidates or parties who spend beyond the sanctioned limits. There was no power to it. These are the things which makes Election Commission of India and its functioning in controlling the expenditure ineffective. And then, what are the vulnerabilities of Election Commission of India as an independent agency? The first one is security of tenure. It exists only for Chief Election Commissioner, and other election commissioners can be removed by the President of India. Though consultation with CEC is necessary, but whatever the advice given by the CEC is not binding on the President of India. And their very appointment, who is appointing them? President of India is appointing them on the advice of Council of Ministers. Yes. So obviously we have to change that situation. We have the committee that is called, what is the committee? What is the committee? Tarakunde Committee. Second ARC. All these recommended for a collegium type of appointment. Now, the number of members in the Election Commission, who determines that? Size of the Election Commission of India. That is determined by the President of India. So we have this, whenever the Chief Election Commissioner is becoming assertive, then how to dilute his position? Increase the number of election commissioners. That's what is. When Peri Shastri was the Chief Election Commissioner, so to decrease his authority, 2 more election commissioners were being appointed. And then there are 2 people. Rajiv Gandhi government has appointed V.S. Sehgal and S.S. Dhanova. Sehgal and Dhanova, they recommended their names. Later in the interview, they clearly told that they are being appointed with a mandate. It means the government expects them to be loyal. That's what they stated. So, however, the Election Commission of India has resisted that. So, the size of the Election Commission of India is determined by the executive to undermine the voice. Now, if they make it as 10-member body, and if they fill some 5 to 6 people with their own members, obviously independence can be compromised. So the size of the Election Commission is determined by this. And then, so expenditure of Election Commission is not charged. Now, today, Chief Election Commissioner, today the tradition is established. What is the tradition? The senior most Election Commissioner is appointed as the Chief Election Commissioner. If you take the Supreme Court, why the senior most judge is to be appointed as the CJI? So we have seen in the case of the Supreme Court that Indira Gandhi has bypassed the senior most judges, and we know the famous Kansraj Khanna. And we also, Rajiv Gandhi government also promoted Mr. Ray. So it means the Chief Election Commissioner position is also vulnerable for that, yes or no? Because it is the President who can appoint the Chief Election Commissioner. Today, a kind of a culture is established where senior most member is appointed as Chief Election Commissioner. But if the executive wants someone to be appointed from outside as Chief Election Commissioner, is that possible or not? So a Chief Election Commissioner can be appointed to the whims and fancies of the government of the day. And Vajpayee government actually wanted to bring in an outsider to be appointed as Chief Election Commissioner, and the other election commissioners resisted it, and they said, if you do that, we will resign from the office. Not to make it as a controversy, they continued with the tradition. Right, these are the vulnerabilities of Election Commission of India. And the next is, as a regulatory agency, what are the vulnerabilities? As a constitutional body, these are vulnerabilities. Now, can Election Commission of India deregister a political party? It can only register a political party, but it cannot deregister a political party. Next is, if anyone gives the misleading information, can Election Commission of India disqualify them? No. Anyone, if he gives a misleading information, now let's take Prime Minister Modi marriage issue has become controversial. So in this context, if the Election Commission feels that it's a misleading information, can it disqualify him? Does it have powers? No. Now, can Election Commission of India monitor the auditing reports of the political parties? If they can submit the political parties' auditing reports, that Election Commission of India made it mandatory. Internal elections in the political parties, they are made mandatory. But today, internal elections in a political party more are a farce, just to meet the regulatory conditions of the Election Commission. But the democratic spirit is missing in them. So is the Election Commission of India is able to monitor this? No. Next is there any law regulating the political parties in India? There is no law regulating the political parties in India. So that limits the functioning of the Election Commission of India. These are the few points you can add. So we discussed the vulnerabilities of Election Commission. We have also discussed various regulatory expansionism of Election Commission of India. Why it failed to arrest the money power. These are the 3 things which we have discussed under the institution of Election Commission of India. But this year, as elections, there are 2 questions in the last year exam. We can expect more a question on the office of the CAG, Comptroller and Auditor General. So, and that we will do in the next class. So let us see the questions which we gave. Discuss the factors that led to regulatory expansionism of Election Commission of India. How the powers of Election Commission of India got expanded. So the 2 important points which you need not miss are Model Code of Conduct and then Supreme Court and its support to the Election Commission of India. Election Commission of India is a constitutional body, is actually served with many weaknesses. So I told to you how it was constituted, security of tenure, appointment and number of members, and then seniority as a principle for Chief Election Commissioner, and then charged expenditure. These are the points which you need to put into. ECI is a bright example for institutional and technological innovation. So we already discussed innovations at the Election Commission of India. In spite of many successes, it failed to arrest the money power in elections. Right. Discuss the vulnerabilities of Election Commission of India as a constitutional body and also as a regulatory body. So electoral bonds cannot solve the problem. So here you need to know in detail what are the electoral bonds, how they work, and then why it can't stop the role of money in these things. And criminalization of politics, electoral reforms, this we study under the Representation of People's Act when we do that. And already for my students I have covered these topics, but the new developments which have come up, the Supreme Court judgments in this area, we are going to look into. So disqualification only exists for them to contest the elections and criminalization of politics. And the Chief Justice of India, Deepak Mishra, has posed a question: how can they be allowed to continue as chief of the political parties and office bearers of the political parties? That's what is the question which was posed by the Chief Justice of India. So obviously criminalization of politics can be an effective topic for our discussion from the light of that question. And also special courts are being appointed for cases against the pending case against the MPs and MLAs. So criminalization of politics can be a question for us this year. So that we need to study. Right, this is how I'm going to continue. Now, and the 2 books for CAG which I am referring are, one is this Rethinking of Political Institutions, and the next book is Not Just an Accountant, to know the inner functioning of the CAG. So that we will discuss tomorrow. And then we also need to discuss regulatory institutions in India and their effectiveness, and we have to discuss the Supreme Court. And you are given a schedule, and by evening 3 questions will be posed in that schedule, the Kalam program schedule, and you are supposed to write the answers and submit them in laix.in/Civilsprep. It's just like an open forum. So many of the students will also learn from your answers because you are coming to the classes, right? So you are expected to post your answers over there, and our people here will correct them, and they will provide you the responses too. But probably they may not be able to correct every answer, but most of the answers they try to correct to you. Right, and then weekly test, I want you to write a bit seriously. And then even if your friends who are writing the examination online, will give you the access to them in the next 1 or 2 days where to upload their papers, and will also correct those weekly test papers. Right, so this program will create wonders only if you participate well. So there are almost some 5 to 6 dimensions in every topic we are covering, based on the current affairs or based on the issues which are there in the news. And along with that, you also need to look into the traditional issues. And I am assuming that you know the traditional issues, and over that I am building the value addition from these textbooks. Right, so brush up your traditional areas. So Lakshmikant Polity, we made it into videos, just to make you to read line by line. Most of the students, they miss that those points, they don't get that verbatim. So Siddharth Arora sir made it into a video. So you can go and watch those videos. So that is some 60 hours, so that just 4 or 5 days you can finish off the entire Lakshmikant. Listen it twice or thrice, entire Lakshmikant comes into your mind, and you get that pictorial memory. Right? That's what it is. And then, thank you very much. And I want your honest feedback on the program. Right? Is this way of doing questions and then explaining briefly about the current affairs and from the larger scope of the topics, and then doing with some answers after you go home? This is what I visualized the Kalam program as. So then improving on your writing skills. That's how I visualized the Kalam program. And then based on this, we will take a review every month. And if we are able to see a remarkable improvement, then obviously this program will be successful. And this is, again, a program which we have envisioned this year. Based on our learnings, within 1 or 2 years, this program gets matured. So as I have started this program afresh, we don't want to charge any money for this. We want to just test it. And actually with test series, I can see there is a lot of injustice happening to the students. Even in my institute also that has happened. Many students are unhappy, sometimes with the test series. What I found out is they pay money, but most of them do not write the tests. So let's take 12 tests are conducted, they end up writing 4 or 5 tests. When they write 4 or 5 tests, what is happening? So for example, if you are paying a huge money, some 20-25,000, each test is costing you around 5 to 6,000. Is that worth it? Is the question. So now, a prepaid program kind of, you give some 10,000 rupees, you write the test, get it corrected with the teacher sitting before him, half an hour, and then 500 rupees from your test or 600 rupees that will be deducted from your account and it goes to the teacher account. So that's what is the system I am trying to bring in. Because the teacher is doing his half an hour of effort and he has to be remunerated. Now if you want a professor to correct the paper, probably you need to shed out some money to him, more money to him. You want relatively a fresher to correct your paper, so you can shed out a lesser money to him. So something kind of this, I want to visualize the test series in the future. Then your money will be given a right value. So again, with regard to the optionals also, the entire system has come into existence centered around a teacher. Yesterday I was speaking with Sandeep. And many a times the justice, because some 500 students are there for a teacher, and correction of the papers and he giving the justice to every student is almost impossible. And that's where the teaching is losing its legitimacy and the online groups are gaining the legitimacy. Because the classes are unable to prove their value to the student. Honestly to be said, this is the situation which is changing today. So now, how it has to be changed? So for every 40 or 50 students, if there is one teacher who can guide them, then that will improve the optional score. This year I am trying that through anthropology optional. So the entire ecosystem of the civil services is not student friendly. It was towards the maximization of wealth by the institute or maximization of wealth by the teachers rather than doing the benefit to the students. Accumulation of capital, that's how it has been. It has been structured. It means it has been nurtured that way for the past 25-30 years. Now many of the teachers, they are looking for opportunities, but the insecurities of the existing teachers, they is not allowing them to grow. So that's why an open platform has to come up where every teacher shall be able to guide the students. Let's take a good university professor is there who spent all his time in teaching this particular subject, who can add value. Right, and how the myth is been created by the regular teachers that academicians do not fit well into the UPSC system. But when I spoke to almost some 180 to 200 professors, including Zine, Rees and everyone. So when I found that these are the people who are preparing the question papers, and these people have the depth, they know the scope of the topic better than any other teacher. They know the scope. So I teach polity. When I have interacted with the university teachers, I have 2 minutes, interacted with the university teachers, and when they taught me new points in federalism, center-state relations, and when I saw their depth, and I got quite surprised. It means this is what we are missing to our students. So that's why I want to bring in few more academics. This new model where academicians also shall be able to guide the students. For that, whatever you pay, the institute act as a facilitator for that. Are you getting my point? And then there are some, again, a balance has to be brought in to the needs of competitive exam. So some aspirants who have failed in this exam, these and the academicians shall be made into a team and we shall develop the esprit de corps among them, so that a new model evolves and this existing model gets totally disrupted. The existing model of 300 classrooms, 400 classrooms have to be totally disrupted and killed. Right, that's what we need to think about to the interests of the students. This entire ecosystem for the past 30 years is built and it has been mimicked to maximize the wealth rather than to provide the student the learning experience. That's why there is a lot of mistrust, disinterest among the students, and they see, or else many of the students, they see institutes as not, or else real centers of their learning. Right. When I interacted with the students, I can feel that among them. But teacher says, as teacher also have a dissatisfaction. I put my blood and sweat and blood in working for these students. I lose my all personal life. But in spite of this, students are not recognizing me. It means there is some gap somewhere. And in the process, the institutions are failing to fulfill their role between the teachers and the students. So the quality of life of teacher and the quality of life of student, expectations of the students, both need to be met. Some new system has to come up. So that new system comes up, some new disruption comes up into the system. How it has to come up, we have to wait and see. Right? The Kalam program is, I can say it as a first step at least towards the disruption which we are trying to bring in. Thank you very much. Addendum 2 and this note says on Election Commission of India, this is Addendum 2. Please collect it from downstairs. Or I'll give you these notes. If you want to get it photocopied, you can get it photocopied. And addendum on the Indian polity, I'll give it to you tomorrow. Whatever I have discussed, that notes I will give it to you tomorrow. Thank you very much.